After family reunion, I checked my safe, and it was empty. Dad came and smiled. We voted you can't live here for free anymore. We invested that money in your brother's college. Shaking, I started calling my lawyer and said to Dad, then you won't mind what happens next. He laughed. Next day, my phone exploded with 37 missed calls. Brother was screaming. Mom was panicking. And my dad was begging me not to do it. But then when I moved back in with my parents, it was supposed to be for 2 months. Maybe 3 if I really couldn't get things going again. I had just closed a small business that I had put my heart and soul into for 3 years. My girlfriend of 5 years left me 2 weeks. After the final sale, I moved out of our apartment with nothing but a few suitcases and the last of my pride. My parents lived in Connecticut in a house I hadn't really considered home since I was 19. Still, it was familiar and I didn't have many options. I came back with the kind of energy people bring to a recovery room. Calm, hopeful, trying to breathe through the embarrassment. I helped with groceries, did repairs around the house, and kept to myself. Music. I barely spoke at dinner unless someone asked me something. My savings were untouched. Music, sitting in a small safe behind a stack of shoe boxes in my closet. 18,000 in cash. My contingency plan slowly accumulated. Over the past decade, not a fortune, but enough to make sure I'd never have to hit the ground. The family reunion was about 6 weeks after I moved in. Just the usual mess of aunts, cousins, uncles, kids I didn't recognize. My dad barbecued, my mom made too much food, and Tyler, my younger brother, made his big entrance. He'd been bragging about getting into some expensive liberal arts school in Massachusetts with a business program that no one had heard of, but everyone pretended to know about. He gave me this weird hug when he saw me really close and extra long, like he was apologizing in advance. The house was too quiet that night. Everyone had left. The wine was gone, and I went up to my room to breathe. For some reason, I walked over to the closet and pulled the shoeboxes aside. The safe looked fine, locked, no signs of tampering, but something in my chest tightened. I punched in the code. The beep was the same. I turned music, the handle, empty. No cash. No documents. Nothing. I stood there for almost a full minute before I closed it and opened it again, as if the money might just reappear. I started rifling through the room, but deep down I knew it wasn't misplaced. It had been taken. Then I heard footsteps. Music. My father appeared in the doorway, holding a coffee cup as if he were strolling through the garden. He said they had taken a family vote, that everyone agreed that I shouldn't be allowed to live there for free, that since I wasn't contributing and Tyler had a future to think about, they made a decision. He said they'd use my money to make the first tuition payment. He smiled, as if I should thank him for the opportunity to give back. I told him I would call a lawyer. I told him what he had done was illegal, and he better pray I didn't go any further. Then I said something I knew would get under his skin. I said, then you won't mind what happens next. He laughed. The next morning, my phone lit up like it was on fire. 37 missed calls, voicemails, texts, messages. My dad's voice screaming. My mom panicking. Tyler begging me not to ruin everything. I didn't answer. I was already gone. I'd left before sunrise with my duffel bag, my laptop, and a printout of a document they didn't know existed. Something from years ago with just enough legal weight to open the hornets' nest they'd kicked. And I was halfway to Vermont, to Uncle Rick's cabin. He got the second ring. They finally pulled that crap, huh? Good. Now we make them regret it. You're not going back there. And I didn't. Not until it was time to show them what a real mistake felt like. Uncle Rick's cabin wasn't the usual cozy Vermont getaway. It was a 2-story structure deep in the woods, far from anything that could be called civilization. He built most of it himself after quitting his job in finance and deciding that the modern world could go to hell. It smelled of pine with smoke and gasoline, and there was no Wi-Fi, no music, TV, just a landline phone, a generator, and a silence that felt more honest than anything I'd heard in years. When I pulled up the gravel driveway, Uncle Rick was already sitting on the porch drinking coffee from a chipped cup and wearing a sweatshirt with the sleeves cut off. He didn't ask any questions. He just nodded and said my room was upstairs. The next morning we ate eggs and sausage from tin plates on the back porch. He lit a cigarette even though he said he had quit. Then he asked me to tell him everything. So I did, from the missing money to the smug look on my dad's face to the part where they said they voted to use my savings for my brother's college tuition. I told him how my mom tried to act like it was some kind of noble sacrifice. And I told him how Tyler didn't say a word while it was going on. Uncle Rick didn't say anything for a minute. Then he asked if I still had Grandpa's trust papers. I nodded. It was in my backpack. The trust wasn't huge, about $40,000 total, but it had a clause that specifically protected me from financial abuse by family members. I never thought it would come in handy until now. Uncle Rick got up, went to the cabin, and came back with a dusty folder. Inside were records going back years, contracts, letters, scanned receipts. And in the middle of it all, a signed IOU from my dad dated 2015. He borrowed $18,000 from Uncle Rick, the same amount I had in my safe. He never paid it back, Uncle Rick said. He kept saying next month, next quarter, next bonus. I'm tired of waiting. I made 3 phone calls that night. 1 to the lawyer who had my trust. 1 to the family accountant who never liked my dad. And 1 to a friend in Boston who specialized in real estate law. Quiet guy, very precise. He owed me. The next day, the investigation began. All it took was an email and the documents to back it up. My parents got the notice by certified mail. I didn't even need to hear their reaction. My brother Tyler called me 10 minutes later and asked me what I'd done. I hung up without answering. I spent the next few days helping Uncle Rick clean out the garage. That's when I found the box of old VHS tapes. Most of them were home movies, dusty and unlabeled, but one had a piece of tape across the front labeled 2002 July. Reunion. I played it that night out of boredom. It showed my dad drunk standing in front of a campfire. He was bragging to 2 uncles about how easy it was to move money around without leaving a trace. At one point, he actually said I could steal from my own kids if I wanted to. They'd never see it coming. I stared at the screen for a long time after that. The next morning, I burned a digital copy. I sent it to my lawyer, and I sent a USB with the clip to my mother, anonymously. 3 days later, she called me. She was crying, not to apologize, begging. My mom's voicemail played on the speaker as I sat at the kitchen table in Uncle Rick's cabin. She was crying so hard she could barely form words. She said she didn't know what was happening, that everything was falling apart, that I had to stop what I was doing, that I was destroying family. I let it play to the end and erased it. Uncle Rick sat across from me and finished his coffee. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he looked up and said, "Let's make it really hurt." It was the green light I didn't know I needed. I started with the trust. Once the investigation began, things moved quickly. The trust was legally protected from internal family manipulation, and my parents had unwittingly triggered the entire clause. By taking my money, it wasn't just my $18,000 anymore. Every asset my grandfather had tied up in the family now had to be accounted for and audited. That included the car my parents leased in Grandpa's name after he died, and the vacation home they'd been quietly renting out under the table. Within 48 hours, a forensic accountant had contacted them. I wasn't even on the calls, but I heard. They were panicking. While that was happening, I made my next move. The shell company I'd set up years ago, during my startup days, Tyler C. Investments, was just sitting there. I'd used it once to bill a client as a joke, but it had a real bank account and it was in my brother's name. Completely legal, music, and now extremely useful. I collected every odd-looking transaction from that account, including the last chunk of my startup money, about $6,000 that had been deposited just before I crashed the business. I had just enough documentation to make it look like Tyler had hidden undeclared income while applying for student loans and grants. I filed anonymous reports with both the college and the Department of Education. By the third day, Tyler's financial aid was frozen pending investigation. His classes were canceled. He was barred from campus housing and told not to return until the situation was resolved. He was home for the weekend. He called me 6 times that day. Music, then started texting. Said he had no idea what I was doing. Said he didn't take the money. Said it wasn't fair. I didn't respond. He was right. It wasn't fair. But neither was being robbed by your own family and being told it was for your brother's education. I wasn't done yet. Uncle Rick pulled out the folder again. We drafted, music signed, and documented a formal collection notice for the $18,000 loan he made to my dad 8 years ago. He added interest, and then we filed it with the county clerk. After that, we put a lien on the house. It wasn't the house I grew up in. It was the new one, the one my parents bought after my father's big promotion, the one they were trying to sell so they could move south. This house was now legally frozen. It couldn't be sold, refinanced, or used as collateral. 2 days later, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. My dad. I let it ring. Then I drove by the house to see what was going on. There was a moving van out front, but no one was loading it. My dad was pacing the front yard yelling into his phone. Music? My mom was sitting on the porch with her face in her hands. Tyler was just standing by the car, looking completely hollow. That car, a black Mercedes SUV, parked right on the curb. I remembered when they got it. My mom had called it a celebration purchase, said it was a graduation present for Tyler, but the plates were in Tyler's name, and after digging a little deeper into public records, I found that the car had been listed as a college-related asset on their financial records and co-signed by my dad. I filed a tip with the IRS using a proxy identity and threw in every document I had misused of student funds. Music, unreported income, co-signed debt, attached to grant money. It didn't take long. They flagged the account, audit, pending. That was when I pulled the final pin. There was a blog in New Haven that ran stories about local corruption and scandal, a small operation, music, but with a surprisingly wide reach. I sent them an anonymous email. It included the VHS clip of my dad bragging about stealing from his own kids. In 2002, the lien documents, the revoked student aid letter, the summary of the trust investigation, everything. I told them the story was true, And if they didn't believe it, the proof was attached. They ran it the next day. Connecticut family facing allegations of financial abuse, fraud, and estate mismanagement. It went viral faster than I thought. A regional news site picked it up. Then someone shared it on Reddit. A former colleague of my dad saw it and posted in the comments. Apparently, the company was already looking into past customer complaints. That was all it took. My dad was suspended by the end of the week. As the news van pulled up to the house, I got a text from Tyler. Just 3 words. Why are you doing this? I didn't answer, but I wanted to say because you watched them do it to me and you didn't say anything. Uncle Rick gave me a beer that night. We didn't say much. We just watched the sky turn orange over the trees. And he said, "You're just getting started, kid." It wasn't just the article. It was everything that followed. After the story broke, everything went from a slow burn to a complete meltdown. Music? My dad's face was blurred in the online version, but people knew. His coworkers, the people at the country club, the neighbors. I got a message from a girl I hadn't talked to in years. Your family's a mess. Damn. But it wasn't just embarrassment anymore. They were beginning to lose control. 3 days after the article, Uncle Rick got a call from a contact he still had at the probate office. Apparently, a new petition had been filed by my dad. Music? He was trying to claim that the trust had been mismanaged, that Grandpa's will was flawed, and that everything should be reviewed for irregularities. It was a desperate move, a last-ditch attempt to regain control. Uncle Rick laughed when he heard it. He said, "Let him try. He has no idea what we have." And he really didn't, because I hadn't used the 2007 footage yet. It was a home video of a Thanksgiving dinner at our old house. My dad was talking to one of my uncles about some side money he'd been making from clients' cash-only consulting. He bragged that he never reported it. He said it was easy to move it through his kids' accounts to avoid detection. He even said on camera that he once used my name to open a savings account that I never knew about. I had it all digitized and sent again, anonymously, music to the IRS investigator already working the case. But that wasn't the part that broke her. What broke her was the bank. Uncle Rick had me file an open records request for old bank activity associated with that shell account Tyler C. Investments. I figured it would just show odd deposits. What I didn't expect was the connection to my mom. She'd been transferring small amounts. $300 here, $450 there from her own savings into the account for over a year. The memo lines were vague, but enough. Said things like Tyler School Fund or emergency, that the pattern was clear. She wasn't just involved, she was quietly moving money around, probably to make it look like Tyler was more financially independent than he was, which would increase her eligibility for aid. I didn't even have to lift a finger. Once the financial aid office saw the full documentation, the college officially dropped him. Not suspended, expelled. Aid revoked. Record flagged for fraud. 2 days later, my brother showed up at Uncle Rick's cabin. I wasn't expecting him. He looked thinner, older somehow. Worn down. We stood outside while Uncle Rick stayed inside, giving us space. Tyler asked me if I hated him. I told him I didn't, that I just didn't care anymore. Then he said something that surprised me. He told me that Mom had started sleeping in the guest room, that Dad wasn't talking to anybody, that an IRS notice had come that morning about back taxes and a formal audit. He said my mother had started looking for work. My dad had stopped shaving. And then he said the one thing I wasn't expecting. He said I found something in Dad's desk. I think you should see it. He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a typed letter, not to me, to Grandpa, dated 2009. It was a confession. My dad had borrowed money from Grandpa, $25,000, and promised to pay it back in 5 years. He never did. The letter ended with a line that hit me like a hammer. If you tell Alex or Rick, it will destroy what's left of this family. It was never about the money. It was about power, control, image. Tyler walked away without asking for anything. Didn't cry. Didn't beg. Just said I didn't know what they were doing. I swear. Later that night, Uncle Rick looked at the letter and said, "Your dad's not just a thief. He's a coward." Then he grinned and said, "You want to finish this? I've got one more card to play." And what did he tell me next? It changed everything. When I started all this, I didn't care about the headlines or the humiliation. I didn't care if my parents cried, or if my brother dropped out of college, or if the neighbors whispered about it at the grocery store. I just wanted one thing: my money back. The $18,000 they took from my safe. Without a second thought, the money I'd saved through a decade of struggling side gigs, freelance work, cutting corners when I had nothing. I had plans for it. Security. Opportunities. They stole it like I was a burden they could siphon off. That's what lit the fire. But now it had become something else. Bigger. Wilder. I'd started a chain reaction, and it was spinning fast. But somewhere between the shell company, the IRS, the lien, music, the eviction, and the news stories, I still hadn't gotten the money. Uncle Rick reminded me. He said, "If you don't collect, it's all just noise." So I started digging again, through statements, records, anything I could find. And then I found it buried in a routine bank report tied to Tyler's name. A wire transfer, just over $19,000. Not in or out. Music, just sitting there, at a bank I didn't recognize. I ran the routing number. It wasn't in Connecticut. It was in New Jersey, in a different branch of the same bank my dad used to work at before he got promoted. I called the bank, posed as Tyler, said I've lost access to my account and needed help resetting my credentials. They asked me for basic ID verification. I had it all. Date of birth, last 4 social numbers, address history. I'd lived with him. I watched him fill out job applications. They gave me a temporary login. And there it was, $19,426.88, sitting there untouched, labeled Education Disbursement Reserve. It wasn't financial aid money. It wasn't scholarship money. It was mine, transferred from my stolen cash through a holding account and tucked away in that quiet little pocket just in case. College costs go up. Uncle Rick and I called his lawyer, filed an official claim for restitution, backed with documentation and the trust case. But we knew it would take time. So I did something else. I took a step they wouldn't expect. I showed up, unannounced, at the house, knocked as if I hadn't burned the place to the ground. My mom answered. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. I asked to speak to my father. He came to the door, arms crossed, face stone cold. I told him I knew where the money was. I told him he had a choice. Return every penny within 48 hours, or I take the account to civil court, charge him with theft and fraudulent conversion, and add the footage from the VHS tape as a bonus. I told him that the trust was already preparing a full asset forfeiture action, that every bank account, every piece of property, every suspicious transaction would be examined. I said I didn't want excuses. I didn't even want explanations. Just the money. He didn't say a word, just stared at me, I left. 2 days later, I got a message from my bank. Incoming wire transfer. $18,000 even. No note. No signature. Just the number. But I wasn't satisfied because I knew he wasn't sending it out of remorse. He sent it because he was afraid. And Uncle Rick? He said we would scare him even more. I have the money. Technically. 18 grand wired directly to my account. No message. No apology. Just like I asked. Music? It was the only thing my dad had done. Fast in years. Uncle Rick poured us a couple shots of bourbon when I told him. He raised his glass and said, a little less. But if you think that means they're done, you don't know your old man. He was right. That same night, around 2 a.m., I got a text from my mom. Just one sentence. He's going to post. About you. I didn't even know what that meant until 2 hours later, when someone I barely knew from high school texted me a link. Read it. Music, a disposable account, a rambling post on some parenting subreddit. The title said it all. My son stole our lives and is trying to ruin us. Parents, beware. It was a full-blown manifesto. It said I was a freeloading, ungrateful failure. That I'd come home with nothing, refused to work, disrespected their generosity, and turned my brother's future to ashes. He claimed I had blackmailed my own family and used a network of shady lawyers and old family grudges to manipulate the system. He even claimed that Uncle Rick had brainwashed me. That line almost made me laugh. But the best part? At the end, he added, if anyone knows a good way to stop an adult child from destroying your legacy, DM me. I'm serious. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Reddit did the work for me. People tore the post apart, linked to the original news story, screenshotted the evidence, and dragged him through the mud. It got so bad that he deleted the account within 12 hours. I saved everything, just in case. But that was the last straw. I told Uncle Rick I was done playing defense. I wanted out of the whole mess. Not just the house. Not just the name. The history. So I did something I've been thinking about for weeks. I legally changed my last name. It wasn't dramatic. Just a little form at the clerk's office. A few notarized signatures. But when I walked out, it felt like cutting a rope that had been strangling me for years. 2 days later, I packed up and moved into a small apartment in Montpelier. Nothing fancy, just a quiet corner unit in a 3-story walk-up with a fire escape and an old heater that rattled when it was turned on. It felt like mine. I bought a used couch off Craigslist, some records from a thrift store, and set up my old speakers. I played the same record on repeat for a week. I didn't tell my parents where I was going. Didn't give them the address. Changed my phone number. Blocked any number associated with the house. They had no way of reaching me now. I left a single message in a locked document on my laptop just in case I ever felt like reaching out again. It read, you taught me how to fight, and then you forgot that I could. But I wasn't bitter. I was free. And Uncle Rick, he was just getting started.